Greetings, friends. This is Gemini and Maurice. It is wonderful to see you. We are beginning a week of a sacred journey, a ceremonial journey that I'm just very happy to be with Maurice and doing this. And he called me just a few weeks ago and said, hey, we really need to get centered in for this powerful week of heavenly happenings, powerful times on earth, powerful times in the heavens. So it's really glad to be invited, because in our busy lives, sometimes it's hard to take the time, but it's so important that we do. So Maurice, thank you from my heart for initiating this and inviting me and bringing so many of our friends in on it. And I'll pass this over to you.
Thank you so much. And indeed, I've been thinking about this event for a long time and how important it is, especially after a year that has been so dramatic and traumatic. And knowing ahead of time as astrologers, seeing these cycles coming and knowing that the Pluto-Saturn was going to be a dive into the underworld, was going to be exclusively something that would take us to the shadow world, and how it would challenge humanity as we've seen it in the past. So seeing that this Jupiter Saturn kind of completely shifts the climate, and Aquarius is air, we know that. So from the depth of the underworld, we can ascend. And it's important as astrologers to not only explore our practice and explore the heavens in an academic and in a mental way, but to honor, this cycle, to understand there's consciousness involved. Not just ours, but nature, and nature not just on the earth, but in the heavens. So we're very excited to have such a strong response to our efforts in such a short notice. We, of course, welcome you to the full program, which includes both the ceremonies and the master classes, where we will explore in depth how this affects humanity, because we're learning about ourselves, but we're also learning about how these events will change the world for the next 200 years. And so we all may have heard bits and pieces about these on the internet or through other teachers, but Gemini is one of the leading experts in astronomy for astrologers. His body of knowledge is truly revolutionary, and I was glad he was available and able to do this, because we are at a stage now, especially with the planets in Aquarius, where we need to understand how the charts work in nature. We need to understand how the physical experience can enrich our practice, our interpretation. I have a record, and my body of knowledge relates to understanding the soul journey. So it's both our personal soul and it's the collective soul. So check the website, mauricefernandez.com, and you will see there a full detail about the program. And we want to make a difference. We want to have an impact, and us coming together, setting intentions for this convergence of energy can make a difference worldwide. And we know how critical it is, given what we've been through, not just this year, but in the past few years. So thank you all, and let's take it forward.
Yeah, thank you, Maurice. And I'm really excited for us to be on sacred land and tuning in for ceremonies. We'll have 5 ceremonies, as Maurice said, 1 for each of the elements, and we'll move in the zodiacal order that the great conjunctions of Jupiter and Saturn have moved through, and a 5th ceremony for the quintessence, the coming together of all of the elements. And yeah, one of the classes we're teaching that I'm actually most looking forward to is our class on the elements, because Maurice and I have very similar and also very different approaches there. And that's something I think I'm very excited about in our sharing in general. This total solar eclipse in Sagittarius today was opposite my Gemini moon, and Maurice's as well, because it's a conjunction we share in our synastries. We both have a late degree Gemini moon reflecting Scorpio light. And so we are connected in many ways. And we also do things very differently. And I think that's really important when we're talking Gemini, to have a couple, and perhaps more importantly, a million perspectives, to get after the one truth. And yes, Maurice mentioned, and many of you will know this, I'm kind of a sky guy. That's where I got my start. Just looking up and falling in love with the heavens. And it took me a while to find this beautiful craft that's called us all in, this craft called astrology. I began my start in the shamanic astrology mystery school, which has a very intent devotion on keeping a living sky practice. And so much of what I've learned has been from that school, from other teachers like Maurice in the study of classical astrology, but most of my learnings have been from just sitting with the sky. And it's something I just cannot invite enough, right? That we take the time to integrate. We're in these gazillion webinars, right? And to really spend some time to integrate this information, this endless information of the amazing heavenly happenings. And so one thing that a sky practice, a sky yoga offers, is just taking that time. I like to say we can't have a breakthrough without taking a break. So the sky is here to hold you. And she also reminds us, I feel, that very importantly, we can never know it all. And that's really important as astrologers, to sit in the truth of that, right? And it helps us know that this is great mystery we're accessing. And then, a personal sky experience will teach you your personal astrology. I feel that is so important, that we connect to the roots of our craft, but also to the heavens in the way that they speak to us. We are each a very specific reed blowing in this cosmic wind, and we are all each meant to be a different instrument in that regard. And so I see Maurice is sharing his page here, mauricefernandez.com, where you can find link from the homepage right to this page devoted to this ceremonial and masterclass week that we will find ourselves joined together for, like the good Gemini moon twins that we are. But let's head out to space. I find personally that if I can understand more about the astronomy, the quantity of the heavenly happenings, it helps me tune into the correspondences, the quality. Just as there's noise from an instrument, sound is how that noise dances you. And so there is very measurable quantity heavenly happenings, like the coming Jupiter-Saturn conjunction and near occultation, like the total solar eclipse in the sign of Sagittarius today. But how that quantity of the heavenly happenings dances you, that's where it becomes quality, right? So I like to start with the former. I like to start with the measurable, although I like to do this in a sacred way. And so I call my work sacred astronomy. And a lot of that's really devoted to hopefully realigning to the way that the ancients did this thing. And how can we know? I mean, we have writing that goes back so far, but really, I think we're talking about something that goes back to the beginning of when we first started looking up. So one of the greatest portals of sacred astronomy is just studying the sun and the moon and the earth, the 3 parts of the philosophy of the whole thing, I believe, in the words of Hermes here in the Emerald Tablets, this great foundation of Western mystery traditions. And I think that this 3 parts we can often describe astrologically by the three elements of which our planetary glyphs are composed, and they are the circle of spirit and the cross of matter and the crescent of soul. And so much of my study has come through a sister tradition of astronomy, which is sacred geometry. So learning to draw these has really been a profound opening for me. So I wondered why not the circle of crescent, or circle and crescent and cross in this glyph for Rahu and Ketu for the north and south lunar nodes, which of course we know are so important to eclipses. But I realized that I just wasn't seeing it, that this is really the image for, in this case, the north node, which maybe should look more like that, because it requires both the north and south nodes for this sine wave that the moon performs every month as she dances above and below the path of the sun, the ecliptic, as it's called, which I typically color yellow to reference the great one light of sunlight. So the ecliptic really is Earth's orbital path about the sun. But from our point of view here on Earth, we experience our yearly orbital motion in the sun moving about us on this plane, this ecliptic plane, which sounds like eclipse for a very good reason. Now, if we project this plane out towards infinity in all directions, we encounter the constellations of the zodiac. And so from Earth's point of view, the sun is always held by one of those 12 star groups. But of course, we can't see what constellations the sun is aligned to, because you will go blind trying. There's something very important about sun. It is great mystery. And there's many ways where we can actually discover where the sun is by exploring the phase and the position of the moon, who will at night show us the stars to which she is aligned. So it's one of the many ways I like to say that moon, Diana delivers sun, Apollo's birth to Earth. And I'm going to speak about that a bit, because some of the great science of the sun, moon, earth system is conveyed by the ancients in myths. So here's an image of a new moon, right? Moon and sun in the same degree of the zodiac, in the same place of the ecliptic, but not an eclipse, because as you can see in this image from the northern hemisphere's point of view, this is the moon like above the sun, and the southern hemisphere is below the sun. That's moon with what's called northern latitude. And so most new moons are like this, no moons, right? No shadow for you. Because the moon's on her own course, which I like to call the circle of soul. And the moon's course, from our point of view on Earth, diverges from that of the sun, the ecliptic, by about 5 degrees. And every month, the moon is snaking north across the ecliptic, and then south across the ecliptic at the north and south nodes, which are, from Earth's point of view, the places where the paths, the apparent paths of the sun and the moon intersect. And so, of course, the moon and the sun need to meet near either one of these south or north nodes, these intersection points, for us to experience the powerful gateway of an eclipse. And it happens about twice a year, because the sun moves from one node to the next in about 6 months. So at the time when the sun is either aligned at the north node, which is currently in Gemini, or at the south node, which is currently in Sagittarius, and this is where the moon and the sun for new moon met today, around the time the new moon will be a solar eclipse, moon occulting the sun from Earth's point of view, and associated either the week before or the week after, full moon will be a lunar eclipse, the moon occulted by Earth's shadow. And as you likely know, we had a very partial, actually what's called a penumbral lunar eclipse in the sign of Gemini, 10th degree of Gemini, which hosts the royal star Aldebaran in our day and age, a couple of weeks ago. And then this morning on December 14th, 2020, a total solar eclipse in the sign of Sagittarius. So these crossing points are called the lunar nodes, and then the moon diverges from the sun's path by about 5 degrees in what's called celestial latitude at points that are square to the lunar nodes. And these are the points that are called the lunar bending. So this is the southern bending, where the moon reaches her furthest south latitude from the ecliptic, and then north node, where the moon snakes north, and then the northern bending here. And we're going to see in today's eclipse, and at this time, that the planet Neptune, in the sign of Pisces, right, which is further along from Sagittarius, is at the lunar, at the square to the lunar nodes, at this place called the southern lunar bending. Now, Neptune has its own nodes. All planets have their own nodes, but it has long been known that any planet that is either conjoined to the lunar nodes or square the lunar nodes is one that we should pay particular attention to. So I know Maurice, who wrote a great book called Neptune, will be speaking about Neptune squaring the nodes in this particular eclipse. And Maurice is an evolutionary astrologer, right? A very popular paradigm. There's many approaches within that field employed by modern astrologers. And much of this sees the nodal passage in the incarnational path. So I'll allow him to speak about that. But I will say there's something very interesting. Like in my cosmology, the sun is spirit. And I mean, when I say that, the one and only thing. And the moon is soul. The crescent is born when the one is reflecting itself or reflecting upon itself. And so these places where from Earth's point of view, soul, moon is kind of descending through the realm of spirit down to earth and then ascending back to the heavens, if you will. One of the lines from Hermes' Emerald Tablet is, it descends to the earth and it ascends to the heavens, and again it descends to the earth, achieving the force of things superior, which means above, and inferior, which means below. And there's something very important about these lunar nodes, and if you've been studying for astrology for some time, you certainly know that. So this is a syzygy, this alignment of the three things, right? Which is true. It's a term that applies to any alignment of any three astronomical bodies, typically reserved for sun, moon, and earth at times of new moon or full moon. And we could say for sure the most powerful ones of those are when we have this apparent motion. So I think we see this in Hermes' magical caduceus as well, and the slithering of the serpent, right? We see south node, south node, north node. And because the moon every month snakes above and below the path of the sun, this is also why this symbol, which today we use to draw the south node, and it was once the north node, interestingly, it comes from the head of the king cobra. So there are many traditions, like this is the alchemical Ripley scroll, where we see the sun and the moon and the dragons. Or maybe you're familiar with the great story of Rahu from India. Rahu and Ketu were once one, but they were cut in half as a result of a truth told by the moon and the sun, and they seek revenge. And so it's said that what a solar eclipse is Rahu eating the sun. But fortunately, then it just passes through this stump where his body once was. Interestingly, the tail can also eat the sun, or either one can eat the moon. Many lands, many tales of dragons or serpents and eclipses, both solar and lunar eclipses, like Bacanawa story told of the dragon that eats the moon during a lunar eclipse in the Philippines. There's a great story from the Greco-Roman tradition of the birth of Apollo, sun, and Diana, moon, or Helios and Artemis in the Greek, yeah. Their mother in the Greek was Leto, or in the Latin Latona, who pregnant with them was on the run for their father, who was Zeus or Jupiter's wife, Hera or Juno, was jealous that another was carrying her husband's child. Turned out to be children, but Latona had to deliver them on the run. So Hera had conjured up this dragon, Python, to chase the pregnant Leto. She found a safe place and had to do this really on her own. The first was born, and this was Diana, the moon. And you may know that the moon, we say, is the queen of midwives. And Diana's first gig was delivering her brother, Apollo. Now, interestingly, I heard recently that it was 9 days between the birth of the first of the moon and that of the sun. I haven't confirmed that yet, but I was interested in hearing that because it brought to mind a few things. One is that about 9 days after new moon is when moon trines the sun, 9-10 days. And that's a beautiful phase to see in the sky. But also that 9 days time corresponds to a sacred number. And I want to just confirm this because it came in so recently. So I've got my calculator out. Let's see. So 9 days times 24 hours, 216. And 216, interestingly, the diameter of the moon is 2160 miles. Half of that, the moon's radius is 1080 miles. The moon, of course, is associated with silver, which has an atomic weight of 108. It's said that, and this is within like 99.5% for all of these, that moon is 108 moons from Earth, and sun 108 suns from Earth, and the sun is 108 Earths in diameter. So this magical, this mystical number, it said there's 108 names for the divine goddess, 108 beads on the mala, 54, half of that on the rosary, that it said that Moses spoke 108 names for the divine to split the Red Sea. And we could go on and on and on. So it's one amazing link between sun, moon, and earth that actually arranges, from Earth's point of view, this experience that spirit, sun, and soul, moon are the same size in our sky. Maybe an easier one is that the moon is about 1/400th the size of the sun by a diameter, but 400 times closer to Earth. And this is why we can experience this amazing miracle of a total solar eclipse, the diamond ring, this celebration of the sacred union of these two. I mean, miracle, and maybe call it a coincidence, you know, goddess or the matrix, you decide. It's up to you how you wish to align. And so interestingly, in this image, we see Apollo and Diana clubbing this dragon, right? Because again, the dragon, the nodes, the moon, the serpent snaking above and below the path of the sun, and the nodes are where, in a sense, they are all one, where we can draw an arrow through the heart of the earth and through these two sacred places where, from Earth's point of view, the paths of sun and moon intersect the lunar nodes. Typically, you'll see Apollo and Diana not with clubs, but with bows. And Diana's bow is something that we skywatchers experience every month when the clouds allow. It is this phase of the moon, the first waxing phase after the no moon, after the new moon, which we can't see unless you're in a special place on Earth during a solar eclipse, right? So when the moon comes out, and then we see Diana's bow, right, who's in a sense shooting arrows at her brother Apollo, who was just set below that. In many of the great lunar calendars that are tuned to the month of moon phases, like the Hebrew calendar coming from Babylonian, from the Assyrian calendar, like the Chinese lunar calendar, it's this phase, it's this apparent rebirth of the moon from that darkness we experience when she gets so close to the light, that this is the time where the month begins, that the moon so beautifully is born in the sunset sky. And so there's something about death and birth coming together to teach us more about life here on Earth. So here I show that dragon because I want to speak about Apollo's bow. And it took me some time. Actually, I had to experience it with my own eyes. I had my own experience, my first experience, and only one so far, of a total solar eclipse in August of 2017. I know many of us did, and most amazing thing I ever saw. And as it was happening, I was like, oh, wow, that's Apollo's bow, right? I mean, you get all of these different shapes. It's like kind of like all of the phases within minutes time. And on the way in and out of the diamond ring of the total eclipse, you see Apollo's bow. So it said that later in life, Apollo caught up to that dragon and put an arrow through its head, Python, and then took over as oracle, right? So the oracle of Delphi, there's still so much serpent and dragon symbolism, although it's long been the oracle of the sun. So that's how I like to think of these nodes, as like this Apollo's arrow, this arrow of truth. And I think that's it's so important, especially at this time. So we'll get to the charts in just a second and speak some about what we feel this eclipse, this portal, is offering for us and inviting for our participation. But a little bit of nerd stuff first, okay? This is a good slide to take a screenshot of. It's hard to find these for some reason, I found. But these are the eclipse limits. So how close either a new moon-sun conjunction needs to be to either north or south lunar node, or how close a full moon, the moon-sun opposition needs to be to the nodes for either a total or partial or maybe eclipse. You also see this asterisk, so I want to speak about that quickly because it brings us into a different kind of month that's important to know about. So the solar eclipse may be total or it may be annular when within 9 degrees and 55 minutes. Now, I love that for a solar eclipse within 18 and a half, because we're going to speak later about how the nodal transit of the zodiac, typically in a retrograde motion, is 18 and a half years. So, I mean, what kind of magic is this? And then I love also that for the lunar, it's 12 and a quarter, right? So, because there's 12 and a third moons, lunations per year, and then again 18 and a half years for the nodes to transit the zodiac. So when we start studying the sun, moon, earth system and the amazing canon of sacred number found therein, it's just mystery just pours in. It's incredible. So how do we know if on our chart, if a new moon's within this distance of a lunar node, if it is a total solar eclipse or an annular solar eclipse? Okay. Well, the total solar eclipse celebrates this truth that from Earth's point of view, sun and moon appear to be the same size. And you get that diamond ring as the perfect occultation happens as the moon hides the sunlight from Earth during the day and the temperature drops and the animals go as if they're heading to their sleeping places and all of these miracles and mysteries. But the annular solar eclipse, it's often called the ring of fire. Because what happens is the moon and the sun align, center to center, but at a time when, and it's not atypical, when the moon is too far from Earth to appear to be the same size as the sun in our sky. And so the moon at that time is apparently a bit smaller, so you still get a ring of solar fire around the moon. We had an annular solar eclipse earlier this year. In fact, this Gregorian calendar year, we've had a partial, annular, and total solar eclipse, which is a pretty amazing thing. So this is a very exaggerated image, but let me just lay this out astronomically quickly. Orbits are not circles with one center, but rather ellipses with two foci of, energetic love, if you will, okay? The Earth is much more massive than the moon. Surprisingly, not much more, considering the size of most planets in respect to their own moons. That's one of the great miracles of this system, that the moon is 3/11 the size of Earth by diameter. And by the way, that ratio solves the ancient geometer's puzzle of squaring the circle and shows up in the Great Pyramid of Giza and Stonehenge and in many other sacred places. But I digress. So Earth is much more massive than the moon. So one of these two foci, or wells of gravitational love, if you will, according to a poetic expression of current cosmology, exists within Earth's bounds. It's not at her center, and that actually produces a bit of a wobble in the Earth, Moon, Sun system, an amazing thing that shows up in the motion of the lunar nodes. But the other foci of energy between these two, the moon and the Earth, is a dark place in space. There's nothing there, is what I mean to say by that, which astrologers have come to call Black Moon Lilith, fascinatingly. And I could speak about that all day, but for now, just to speak astronomically, when we look from Earth through this place that you can put on a chart, it's true Black Moon Lilith, we are looking at the lunar apogee, which is where the moon is furthest from Earth, okay? And when she is, she's literally apparently smaller and dimmer, like even if full, a little bit dimmer, and slower, right? Very importantly, so slow moon, far moon, that's what I think of that. And many have come to call the moon, when she's on the other side, opposite true Black Moon Lilith in our charts, and that's called the lunar perigee. Many have come to call moon's visits to that place supermoon, especially at times of new moon or full moon, which is a different story, right? Phase. So this is where the moon is apparently biggest, brightest, and fastest. So the reason why I could see in this morning's total solar eclipse chart that it is total is twofold. One, so close to the lunar node here, only 3 degrees and 12 arc minutes away. So well within that 9-degree, 55-minute potential for either being a total solar eclipse, the diamond ring, or the annular solar eclipse, the ring of fire, right? The way that I can tell this one is total is because it's on the other side of the zodiac from true black moon Lilith. And so let me just show this picture one more time. I mean, this is actually the right now true black moon Lilith in late Capricorn. So this would be, or sorry, in late Taurus. Okay, so opposite Taurus, just right close to where Venus is Scorpio, right? So Taurus, Scorpio, and the moon met the sun from our point of view here in Sagittarius today on a quincunx to that point. And so definitely close enough to Earth to be a total solar eclipse, not a super long one. Those happen, it's longer and maybe we could say more powerful. The closer to the nodes the moon meets the sun, and the closer to the perigee, which again is the point opposite true black moon Lilith in a chart. All right, so there's a bit of the astronomy, maybe some of the mystery of the mystery to drop us into the magic of eclipse. And now let's tune into this chart together. Maurice, will you bring us into that portal, please?
Thank you. And here is your slide. I'm just going to recap a little bit and explain what you were referring to. First of all, this is, sorry, that's not what I meant to do. This is the island of Delos in Greece, where Apollo and Diana were born, and their mother had to flee. Their mother Leto had to flee Hera, Juno. So it's a beautiful, tiny island, and there are fabulous statues there. Unfortunately, as it is with many Greek archaeological sites, they tend to, you have to, it's very organized, and you can't just go there and spend unlimited time, and they tend to focus on the historical aspect rather than the spiritual aspect. But it's fascinating to explore those places. I just wanted to show the graphic that Gemini was describing, the 108 ratio between the Earth, the Moon, and the Sun. At a very, very narrow margin. So 97%, 0.6, 99%, and 98%. And this slide was created by a fellow, not sure how to pronounce it, but you can find him online. And
Joe Dubs. His name is Joe Dubs.
Joe Dubs. Well, that's what it's almost saying there. So the fascinating thing and the synchronicity that the Earth, the sun is 400 times larger than the moon, but 400 times further away from the moon, creates this magical synchronicity of eclipses, which is happening during our time, because nothing in space remains exactly at the same place forever. So at some point, it's going to take thousands and I don't know how many thousands of years, the ratio will start to decrease as the moon pulls away from the sun. And so this perfect alignment of size versus distance is not, is not going to last forever. We're in it. I mean, it's not going away tomorrow, but it's still an amazing factor to consider. So I'm going to speak about the different eclipses this month and the coming year, because one of the things, if we look at a chart, wherever we see the nodes transiting is going to be where the eclipses will take place. As Gemini was mentioning, for an eclipse to happen, it has to be a new or full moon within a close range to the nodes. And as his slide, was referring, these are the ratios. So for a solar eclipse, you have a wider orb to the nodes. It can go up to 18 degrees away from the node, and it's still considered an eclipse. For the lunar eclipse, it's up to 12 only. And of course, the closer it is to the node, the more complete, dark, total it will be. And so these are the different eclipses that he mentioned. You can have, another screenshot of that if you would like to. So these are the dates. Today, is the 23 degrees Sagittarius eclipse, and it's Ceres 142. The next one is going to be when the sun is in Gemini. So because the nodes are in Gemini Sag, eclipses will occur in the time that the sun is in Gemini Sag, so end of May and June, end of November, December. And as the nodes keep moving away and in a retrograde motion, they're going to move to Scorpio Taurus, then the eclipses will be end of April, May, end of October, November. So you see 23 Sagittarius, a solar total eclipse, 5 Gemini Sag. The moon will be in Sagittarius, of course, the sun in Gemini, Ceres 121. And then just after that, the solar eclipse. So always remember, eclipses come in pairs. There's a lunar and there's a solar, because there's a new moon and there's a full moon. And they occur within 2 weeks of each other. So whenever the sun gets close to the node, you can say we're in eclipse season. So between May 10 and May 26 and June 10, we are in this eclipse season, but it's going to start even before and end a little after. Then we move forward about 6 months in November, when the next eclipse is already starting to occur in Taurus Scorpio. Even though the nodes are still in Gemini Sag, the actual meeting of the sun moon will happen at the very end of Taurus Scorpio, with the nodes at 1 degree Sag. And then the next solar eclipse at 12 Sagittarius, Ceres 152, which I'll let Gemini complete the whole explanation about the metonic and the Saros cycles. So looking at the nodes, we're going to look at that. I just want to show you some of the charts. And you see here, this is almost the eclipse. You see the moon is not yet conjunct the sun, but it's conjunct the south node. So that's when the moon is fully on the ecliptic. If Gemini was showing you the serpentine north and south node on the ecliptic, so when the moon conjuncts the node, it's at 0 degrees latitude. You see here, latitude is how far it is from the ecliptic, how high or low it is from the path of the sun. So there it's at 0. The sun is always 0 latitude because that's where it is. Everything's in reference to the sun. But the moon is 0 latitude when it conjuncts the node, and that's how we actually know where the nodes are, because there's no physical thing happening there. It's just a point of intersection. So we know where the nodes are when the moon every 2 weeks crosses the south node, and then crosses the north node. And that happens within 2 weeks. It's going to be back to the south node and then back to the north node. And we see when it's at 0 degree latitude, that's where the node is. And that's why, you have mean and true nodes. Now, I think that's a very important note, which is very, which has a deep resonance with eclipses. But if we look at a few hours, 6 hours later, when the moon actually got to the sun, you see the latitude was already 17 south. It crossed, minus means south. It crossed the south node. And now it's already moving away from the south node, 17 degrees in space. So another thing I want to show you, and I hope I'll be able to do this quickly. Why do I prefer to use the true node as opposed to the mean node? Let's look at the ephemeris. You will see that this is the ephemeris. I mean, I don't know if you can see all the details in your small screen, but you see the movement of the nodes, and it's going backward from 20 to 19 and so forth. And when the sun, so you see 19 degrees Gemini Sag, when the sun, this is the sun column, starts to get close to the nodes, so when it gets into Sagittarius, I'll skip the slide because it's just too small. So look at it here. When the sun is actually getting close to the node, approaching and then passing it, the nodes freeze. They don't move backwards anymore. They're like, what's the word? Stationary. So they move backward, forward, and basically freeze on the same degree. So for about 6 weeks, the nodes stay at the same degree. And once the sun moves away, the nodes, keep moving backwards. So that frozen motion of the nodes kind of crystallizes that degree. So when I look at an eclipse, I like to look at both the degree of the eclipse, 23, in this case, 23 Sag, but also the degree where the node is, because that's where, the actual junction between the sun and moon happens. And that's a degree. If you have a planet where the node is freezing and stationary, you're going to have a major activation for 6 weeks. It's like that degree will be amplified. Interestingly, the degree of the eclipse happens to also be the degree of Pluto within 30 degrees. It's a semi-sextile. And that's something to also pay attention to. But let's explore a little bit about the meanings of, the astrological meanings of the North and South node. Actually, something that Gemini highlighted and brought to our consciousness through his own research is that, is that the Earth itself is moving away from the south towards the north. And they managed to find that out when they saw that the constellations close to the star Sirius were getting compacted. They started to shrink. Whereas the opposite, the north side towards Vega, Sirius and Vega are exactly opposite, almost to the same degree. So one is in the south, the other one's in the north. Vega is in the northern ring of the North Stars. It was once our North Star, and it's going to be again in about 14,000 years. But my point is that the Earth moves away from the south to the north, and that has, some kind of resonance with the nodes of the moon. Where, there's always in evolutionary astrology an assumption that the north is where we're going and the south is where we're coming from. And nobody really said, where is that coming from? We're just accepted as a matter of fact, and we test it, and it works. Through countless charts reading, you can definitely see that the south node is familiar energy. It's something we're bringing, and we're kind of in our comfort zone in the south node. And the north node sometimes is familiar if there are planets there. But if there's nothing on the north node and nothing squaring, then the north node is kind of a new energy, something that we are discovering. And it's a balancing point to the south node. So let me see. Where did I put that slide? Okay. So I'm going to speak about it. There's a slide that just was eclipsed. Coming from the south node, please, this is a very important message to you and to everyone. The south node is not something you leave behind, and it's nothing bad and negative that you need to get rid of. And the north node will not be the promise of enlightenment. It's simply a process. As you come through the south node, the south represents, what is familiar, where you're moving away from, and embracing the north, which is the balancing point. But you're bringing whatever you learn from the south node, you're bringing it with you. It's good. These are your gifts. This is something that's powerful. The only thing that you need to understand is that the north node brings a balance, because if you don't embrace the north node, you can get stuck in the south node. Now think about it also geographically. If we look at our own Earth, we look at the southern hemisphere and the northern hemisphere, and you will see archaeologically that the southern lands of Africa and Australia, and I believe South America, but it's not confirmed, are the lands where there is, the earliest records of life and bones, and they refer to Australia as the oldest Earth on the planet. So it's interesting to see that there's also that ancestral connection with the southern hemisphere, just like we're seeing with the nodes. So what do you do with these nodes? You move from south to north, so it's a polarity, but the necessity is to balance both nodes. You need to move beyond the duality of the nodes. So if, say, somebody was born today on this eclipse, and they have this whole package on the south node, they come with what? They come with the sun moon. They come with Mercury. They come with a lot of knowledge. These are, this may be a soul that has an ancestral memory of indigenous experience connecting to ancient knowledge, teacher. And the North Node in Gemini will be about opening up to new knowledge. opening up to diversity. Now, Gemini is the sign of the bridge. Gemini bridges East and West. And I mean that Eastern cultures and Western cultures. Gemini is the synthesizer. So just like we have Gemini moons and Scorpio suns and Gemini moons, so part of the moon function and the North Node in Gemini function is to open up to different channels and synthesize them together. So it becomes a cultural melting pot. So the South Node comes from your own convictions. The Sagittarius, fire. Fire has to do with my experience. That's what I've discovered. And the North Node means everybody's experience. It's air, and air is about diversity. The same way, this person with a North Node in Gemini needs to learn to communicate, to verbalize their knowledge in a way that people can access, people can understand. So I'm going to get further into that. But what I want to highlight is that once you learn the North Node, you have to come back to the South Node. You have to reintegrate it. So this axis of polarities actually fuses into one. And that axis is now integrated. That's when you've mastered it. So again, it's nothing scary. You know, the South Node is not a curse, and vice versa. The same way that you will often hear that eclipses are dangerous, and eclipses, you know, people beat the drum to make sure that the eclipse won't get them. And there were many rituals around how to, you know, appease the, you know, the fact that the sun was eating the moon, or the moon was consuming the sun, and that visual experience of suddenly losing light. And of course, the cultural overlay of, you know, trying to intimidate and maybe control the masses by, you know, instilling fear in the eclipses. But the bottom line is that eclipses are what? Think about it. It's the sun and the moon, you know, this perfect synchronicity of perfect distance and size coming together and aligning in such a way that they're all married together with the earth. So yes, we lose light, but like it is in every ceremony, what is actually happening with this alignment is that it's like you're opening the gates, the portal open. You have the right configuration, and the gates finally open. And what goes through that gate? You have access to something that is beyond the material world, beyond the density of our egoic consciousness. So there's a transmission that happens during the eclipses that is beyond our control and beyond our own conditioning. And now that's not just the day of the eclipse, it's the whole season. You know, as the sun gets closer to the nodes and then the moon joins him, you know, that whole period of time is a period of high activation. And what you can feel personally is that everything speeds up. Things happen more rapidly during eclipses. Events that you've been waiting for, confirmations, you know, your house will sell. You know, it's been on the market for a whole year, and here comes the eclipse. It's activation. So during eclipses are, you know, another nice analogy I like to use is like the season finale of some drama series, where all, you know, the characters are kind of in a climax of some sort. That's an eclipse. And they get married and divorce and they move, and all the human affairs are in full swing. And so the way I like to describe it is that you're blindfolded, you don't have light, and many things are changing around you because of that divine intervention. And the moment you remove, the eclipse is over and you can finally see again what's around you, you see things have changed. So the eclipse is a portal to a higher dimension. We call it, it's a time for divine intervention. That's why, along with the Jupiter-Saturn, we really focus on doing ceremonies during this time. Now, some people will say it's dangerous. And maybe there is some danger because eclipses could take things away from your life. Things that you took for granted. You can lose your job. But at the same time, you can gain a new job. You can meet a person that will become, the love of your life. These dramatic things happen during eclipses. Now it happens in Gemini, Sagittarius, and this has to do with, education and knowledge, but it also has to do with culture. And especially, this dichotomy between the cultures that are connected to the earth, connected to natural rhythms of life, the more indigenous cultures, versus the modern cultures, which see themselves above nature, controlling nature. As well as we can also refer to that in the hemispheres of our brain, the right brain, which is tuned into higher knowledge, and the left brain, which is about putting knowledge into practical use and categorizing things. With the South and North Node in this axis of knowledge, it is a time to balance, intuition with reason, to balance spirituality with science. And now, which one is better? Is science better than spirituality, or spirituality? It's not about that. Both need to work together. You're going to come from one. If you come from the Sagittarius and the South Node, you're going to come from spirituality, and you're going to need to learn the science of Gemini, because Gemini is about reason and equations and connecting dots. But it doesn't mean one is better than the other. It's just the sequence that it happens. And once you reach the reason of Gemini, you bring it back to the spirituality of the South Node. So looking now, at the next eclipses, you're going to have one in May, which is going to be a full moon at 5 degrees. Gemini, and you see here how close it is to the Black Moon Lilith. The Black Moon Lilith is going to oppose the moon, which means the moon is going to be much closer. It's going to be what Gemini was saying, a supermoon. Because if it's opposing the Black Moon, it means it's going to be closest to the Earth. And so it's going to be a gigantic moon. And the following one in June, and then, as we said, in November again. So the one in June is going to be at 19 degrees Gemini. Now, is it better to have an eclipse on the South Node or on the North Node? Again, is it better, to have a heart or a head? You need both. So it's just a sequence of things that you'll need. Right now we're focusing on the South Node energy, on the Sagittarius impulse. And that's what we're bringing in. And in June, we're going to focus on the Gemini side. It's not one better than the other. Now, Gemini mentioned Neptune is squaring all this. And as he mentioned, I did a lot of research on Neptune, and you can check, the book I wrote on Neptune. Make sure it's the second edition. You can find it, online on Amazon, on my website. And there's a whole section on the nodes with Neptune as well as Neptune in every house and sign. So it's a powerful read. It took 18 years to write. So be ready for a thick immersion. But back to our personal experience. Another thing I want to highlight, Gemini mentioned that these are the nodes of the moon because we're talking about the moon crossing the path of the sun. But all the planets have nodes. And it happens to be that the nodes of Uranus are at 14 Gemini Sag, the same way. North node in Gemini, south node in Sag. And these nodes barely move. So they're not going to be somewhere else, anytime soon. So we're going to have a convergence, a conjunction of the lunar node with Uranus node in March. So that's going to be also extremely important because you're going to have a whole Uranian overlay about the eclipse. So we have Neptune square and we have Uranus nodes also triggering everything. So what is this Neptune about? What are we dealing with for quite a while, right? We're in some kind of war with the media, with information, with what is true and what is false. And the square, it doesn't have to be disaster. What the square means in the way evolutionary astrology works for me, the way I interpret it is that the square simply means there's a flip-flop between the south and north node. So one is pulling one way, the other one's pulling the other way, and the square becomes some kind of way to reconcile those extremes. But before we find the solution, it can cause polarization. We know, that we've been through this pandemic and that it traveled everywhere in the world. So Neptune dissolves boundaries, dissolves our thoughts, makes us doubt our own knowledge. What is true anymore? What do I believe in? Neptune's been in Pisces for quite a long time, since 2011. And it keeps squaring planets and nodes in Sagittarius. And what do you see? You see everything is dissolving, but especially our belief system. I would call it losing your religion. The things you thought you could rely on are revealed to be partial, to be incomplete, or to be completely false. So it's a time of confusion because as something is removed, you don't immediately have new answers. And just, you think about the vaccine now coming into this eclipse today, and everybody, is having a different opinion. Sagittarius, it's good because there's hope with Sagittarius that if we get vaccinated, we're finally going to be able to get back to our own lives. But then all the scary reports come and the Bell's palsy and you don't know. I mean, we all have our Sagittarian beliefs and assumptions. But what is the North Node in Gemini saying? First of all, it says listen. First of all, says don't let your emotional bias overcome the result. And in a very Gemini way, do your research, stand back. And yet, because so many planets are on the South Node, it can create this feeling, this difficulty, letting go of your attachments, of your convictions. Because an attachment in Sagittarius is an ideological attachment. It's a religious attachment. And maybe your religion is to be against vaccine. Maybe your religion is about saying we need vaccines, whatever it is. But what is the North Node saying? Air, listen. Neptune, delete your attachment, your assumptions, your noise. Find your silence. And that's why, this ceremonial journey and learning about this cycle can also empty your vessel. Now, the interesting thing we also do is we look at the rulers. The ruler of the South Node is Jupiter in Capricorn, conjunct the whole, the big players, Pluto and Saturn. And so you see how our beliefs, South Node, are conditioned by either our culture or our disillusionment. Jupiter Pluto is it pops all the balloons and all our conviction. It's another, symbol that represents a sobering of our perceptions. But the North Node ruler is Mercury. And where's Mercury? Bang! Exactly on the South Node. So this means that everything, in order for us to gain clarity and to actually see through, we need to resolve these ideological differences. And we need to look at our own biases, our own emotional projections. So that's one aspect of it. The other aspect of it, as it's going to be through the other eclipses, and you're going to see in June, there are going to be more planets on the North Node because naturally the sun's going to be there. So, will we be more mobile? Will we be able to move around, to travel, to mix cultures again? Very likely. My sense is that the nodes in Gemini, Sag, will bring a lot of confusion and diverging opinions, but it will also bring clarity at some point. Now we're also, that's what we're going to talk about, the cyanotic cycle of Uranus, Saturn, and so forth. So there are other factors coming in. So what do you do? What can you expect for your own personal well-being during this year, as these nodes are going to be in Gemini Sat until January 2022? First of all, basic keywords, education. It's a great time to study, to expand your study, to master, new bodies of knowledge. It's a great time to teach. And we have, whether we travel or not, we have those tools. Most importantly, it's a great time for dialogue and to overcome our polarization. So it is a time where we need to learn to listen more. North Node in Gemini is you know, as much as anyone, all of us are teachers, we need to also be students and listen. And importantly, what I would also recommend is that you keep track of the position of Mercury and Jupiter for the whole year by transit and in your natal chart. So wherever your Mercury and Jupiter is in your natal chart, that is going to be pivotal in your development this year by house and sign, but also by transit. So Jupiter, we know, is now in Capricorn. And, you know, we talk about censorship and control of information and the biased media. Next week, Jupiter is moving into Aquarius. It's not just big because of what it is, but because it's the nodal ruler, the implications are much more significant. So we're going to see a shift, a complete radical shift, just as Jupiter moves into Aquarius. And then Jupiter races through Aquarius. It only stays there for 5 months, barely. By mid-May, it moves into Pisces. And that's going to change the nature of things as well. So see what happens with your philosophies, with your conviction, with your knowledge, with your teachings, how you're moving around, how you're communicating. And another thing I want you to retain with Jupiter and Sagittarius Gemini is that this is an axis of opportunity, because it's an axis of capacity, knowledge. When you have knowledge, the roads open up. So you're creating new pathways in your life. The Gemini, diverse pathways, being able to reach many people, and the Sagittarius, faith and optimism that there's more to life than this. So both Gemini and Sagittarius are, it is an axis of opportunities and options. And where are these opportunities? Track Mercury, Jupiter. So let's hear from Gemini more about the Ceros and the Metonics. And thank you in the meantime.
Thank you, Maurice. Yeah, before we go there, let me also say this to folks. For one thing, I put a link in the chat here on Zoom, or if you're watching on Facebook, in the comment section below. I'm really stoked of how many attendees we had. I had to pay a bunch more money to host y'all on the Zoom meeting. It's like 150 bucks. So that was kind of a surprise shock, but we didn't want to tell people that they couldn't come on here. So if you have it in your heart and you have space to do so, and you want to give something back for what you're receiving here, you'll find a comment that I posted with a link to a PayPal donate button. We've got some other expenses coming up for our week of ceremony and teaching. But after we cover that, then we'll give at least a portion to charity. Still need to drop in with Maurice about that. So please, if you will, and you can afford to, no stress, please use that link and send us a couple bucks or whatever. Every little thing helps. And more importantly, let me also say this. There are a lot of comments that I was looking at and some really good questions that are in the chat. For those of you who are here live on Zoom, if you're listening to this later on Facebook or even presently on Facebook, I'm not gonna be able to see all the chat there, but maybe we can address it later. It's gonna be a pretty busy week for both of us. But if you are here live on the Zoom meeting and you have a question, please use the question and answer box. And Maurice and I will try to at least look at those questions for a little bit at the end here. So if you put a question in the chat, ask it again in the question and answer box, please. It just makes it a lot easier because we're seeing a lot of great comments too. So thanks so much. I actually just saw one from Meredith that Made me chuckle with a heart smile. Thank you. Alternatively, let's see. Oh, George Orwell and Aldous Huxley. I think I'll get back to that. And when was 1984 written? I was just doing a little research. My website is geminibrett.com with twin T's, of course. Sadly, I'm struggling with it right now, tech-ish, so didn't get this thing up on my site, but you can find it at mauricefernandez.com. And right on the homepage, you'll see this ceremonial journey with Gemini and Maurice. And so you can learn more about what we're doing, but I just wanted to show you that this is the first of 5 classes that we're going to teach. Now, the rest won't be free, but we would love for you to join. We anticipate probably smaller groups where we can spend some time really dropping into questions and answers for folks. But these are the topics. So alchemy and life force of elements will be the next, and that begins on December 18th at 1 p.m. Pacific. And then we're going to teach a class every day, 4 days in a row. So one in the Jupiter-Saturn Cyanotic cycle, and very importantly, this great conjunction and how it moves through the elements, and looking at previous times in history when we moved from about 200 years of Earth element Jupiter-Saturn conjunctions to about 200 years of air element Jupiter-Saturn conjunctions. We're in that initiation now. We'll look at probably some highlights of the last 800 years of the great conjunction moving through the elements as it does, and just speak about what this seed of Jupiter-Saturn conjoining in the first degree of Aquarius might mean for us moving ahead. More from a cultural, global standpoint than a personal standpoint, but we should also speak about that too, for sure. The third class, or I guess fourth class, will be on the Saturn-Uranus Cyanotic cycle. Maurice mentioned this earlier, but we have really important synods, meaning meeting this year, like the Jupiter-Saturn synod. And then coming up, very important phases within the Saturn-Uranus cycle. The closing square of the cycle with Saturn in Aquarius, squaring Uranus and Taurinus. So that cycle began at the galactic center in the late 1980s, and we'll look at that. And then the last class is astrology and spiritual development. In that class, we will also be speaking about the Jupiter-Uranus square and likely the coming Jupiter-Neptune conjunction in the sign of Pisces. So please head over to mauricefernandez.com, or here's the specific link. Come on over to the Jupiter-Saturn and Saturn-Uranus and Jupiter-Uranus and Jupiter-Neptune and elements class. We would love to have you there. Donation that we're asking for is $260 for 4 serious classes. And then for free, I mean, that's even the wrong word to even bring to ceremony, but we will also be broadcasting a ceremony for each element beginning on Saturday, December 18th. And every day we'll move from in the zodiacal elemental order, beginning with water. We're going to move from water to fire to earth to air to end up where the Jupiter and Saturn conjunction next week will occur on December 21st. So we'll have our air ceremony on that date, on the solstice. And then we'll have a unification ceremony, likely the next morning. So we would love for you to join that. If you join the Zoom meeting that we're on now about eclipses, then we've got you on, we got your email, and we'll send you a link to review this session if you'd like, and a link to sign up for the ceremony broadcast that will happen 5 days in a row next week. There's also an open Facebook group that you can join. And so again, if you're here on the Zoom, then you already know about that. If you're watching this on Facebook, you're probably watching it through the group anyway, but we'll broadcast those ceremonies and just ask you and invite you to be with us and to create a great intentional circle on Earth with us, right? Because that, of course, is the most important thing. This is a portal. Right? Eclipses are so powerful. And I love some of the very important topics that Maurice brought to our attention. I love that he spoke to Mercury at this eclipse, the Mercury-Mars trine, and wedge with these nodes so strongly really speaks, you know, that Aries-Mars energy, Mars having spent so much time there this year. It's still going on, of course, due to his what we find to be kind of a rare retrograde for Mars in the sign of Aries. The Mars square to Pluto, right? So energy is increasing, and also an eclipse is kind of an outlet. So Maurice mentioned 6 weeks before. Some say 6 months after an eclipse. Some say years. Some say 3 months before, 3 months after. I kind of like that. I think it depends on the eclipse. I think it depends on where it plays in your own nativity. And so a great question, of course, is, all right, with a very powerful astronomical happening like this, that's, happening for all of Earth, whether we can see it or not, how is this going to show up for you in your life? I mean, I'm very interested to know, did you feel it today? Are you feeling it now? Have you been feeling it build up? It's so hard to say because, of course, in astrology, we never have a clean experiment. There are so many wheels within wheels within wheels, right? So we might just be feeling Jupiter coming up to Saturn. But I think we felt this eclipse. We had a really nice moment of silent meditation this morning. My partner and I, and her amazing 5-year-old being, is such a teacher for me. And I'll say personally, this eclipse is happening in my 7th house. I'm Gemini rising. And so in that sense, partnerships is a huge part of it. I mean, so I couldn't in any way turn down this opportunity to engage in partnership with Maurice, who's an astrologer that I respect so much, that I've learned about so much, who we come at it in a very different way. But I've really could not say no to like partnering up. It's like, look, this is the eclipse in the 7th. Now that's probably going to make it kind of tricky. I'm also engaged in like a very incredibly time consuming project right now with another partner, is my dear friend Eric Deutsch, who's an incredible piano player. And we're creating soul songs of people's birth charts, and promise to do probably more than we should have before the solstice. So that's just been a lot to do. And of course, that when I get so busy and tax of sleep, not only does it tax me, but also taxes my partnership here at home. So I'm really feeling the eclipse in the 7th. Also, my partner in that project, the pianist, his partner, his wife's father, is sadly just at the gateway of transition. So that's very much in flux. And then interestingly, also, if you've studied annual profections, I'm in a 10th house annual profection. The 7th house is the 10th house of the 10th house. And so in a sense, in my year chart, it's a business thing. So you can see business partnerships like really indicated there. Now it's eclipse, right? So are things going to blow up, or are they going to be empowered? I mean, that really depends upon our intention, right? I think on one level, especially when we look at Sag, some of us will speak about that arrow, and it's in that sense, it's like, hey, pick one, right? Because the South Node in Sag, right, says you're going to be, in a sense, in strength, in like gnosis, if you're in that like one thing. So where this eclipse is showing up in your chart, maybe that speaks. And yet the North Node's in Gemini. And this eclipse, as I mentioned before, another kind of relationship image is an opposition by aspect, and it was opposite my moon and also Maurice's moon, which helped me know that we should really partner up again at this time. We've partnered up to do retreats and many other offerings in the past. And it's always such a treat. So that's a yes instantaneously, but you who follow the cosmic craft, I'm sure you, like me, will cast charts and say, can this work? Can I do it? And all that. And I will say I'm feeling some of that Neptunian dream of, I can do it all. We feel some of that with the Gemini North Node. And I think that, and Maurice mentioned this beautifully, is it science or is it spirituality? I mean, I think, is it red or is it blue? There's all of these challenges, right? In duality. I mean, if you are like me, an independent researcher at this time, and don't typically lean towards the narrative that is broadcast on the TV screens, right? It's harder, I think, and sometimes more isolating to have an alternative point of view right now, when many others and many of my close friends are kind of, it feels like, being trained to believe that if I struggle with the collective narrative or want to ask questions about vaccines, and especially some places, and maybe it'll come here, which are making this experimental medicine mandatory, at least to participate in culture or economy, that there are literally military operations that are being utilized right now to fight against false information for people who are not interested in having an experimental medicine, and dot, dot, dot. So it's, I think, as Maurice said, we really have to do the due diligence and go into our own research. Something I said recently was like, I'm challenged by all of these so-called independent fact checkers. I mean, independent and Mars and Aries should remind us of, has a very, clear definition, and it means me. It means you, like you are your independent fact checker. Now, this does not mean in any way that we shouldn't be in family, in village, in tribe, in culture, right? I mean, I think so much of this Capricorn Council has really been about that. Where is that? Isn't that missing as we're kind of being divided so obviously now into our own just little plug-in to the World Wide Web and whatnot, right? We need to come into a collective, and Neptune should remind us that there's a higher collective, right? There's a mystical collective, that we are all one. And so sometimes experiences that we're all undergoing simultaneously. I mean, no doubt, if you're not confused right now, you're not paying attention, right? Or there should be, I feel, a lot of anticipation. And that, of course, leads to fear. And so that's something we have to sit with, and sit with our expectations and see where they are anchored. You know what I mean? Like, what truth do you believe? What is your dogma? And also, are we allowed to explore many alternatives, right? Isn't that okay to balance opinions and try to find a middle way? But it's interesting right now, I feel that if I consider what these cats over here are saying, even if I think they're crazy, it's like, why are they tuned into that? It's like, a lot of my friends are like, dude, you're even looking at that, you're like a QAnon free, like, I'm no way, right? But I will show you where I feel in this cycle that this eclipse is part of, where we see some of this, distortion and illusion and delusion, like right at its roots. Now, the beautiful thing is alchemical dissolution. And this arrow I was thinking of today, right? I mean, one of my favorite things about Maurice is, contrary to some evolutionary astrologers out there, I don't usually hear this, you've got to get away from one side to go towards the other. No, they are an axis. And the image I had today was of this arrow, and how the arrow won't fly straight unless it has many feathers, right? That are participating together. And I kind of saw those many feathers. And feathers remind me of birds, which reminds me of Gemini in many ways too, right? Like I saw that working together. And so I saw, like, where am I only one feather, where it would cause the arrow to just like quickly, tumble and not have any kind of direction. And how can I balance a feather of mine that is so devoted to one side of a thing, where maybe I think I'm being open-minded, but I actually am just being dogmatic and married to some belief system. And I need to balance that typically with the opposite, right? And then there should be feathers that will square those, or probably, as it is, like a hexagonal placement will be better. Anyway, so I'm digressing here, but my prayer is that this is not just confusion and delusion, which is our personal experience, many of those of us that are paying attention, but the alchemical dissolution, the necessary stage after calcination, the burning, where we flood the burnt matter to separate the salt of the medicine, the body, the earth of the medicine, from the dross, right? And then we recombine that salt with the spirit, which was, right, encapsulated through the burning itself, yeah? And so this dissolution, it requires that we release our grip on what we believe reality to be, so that we can be taken by the winds of change, right? And the tides of maybe fate, to a place where we are meant to be going. And that's hard. We all knew there was great change coming, right? we've also been praying for the necessity of change for so long because we know that we grew up in a cultural way, is every way that is just not sustainable. It's not part of the earth, you know? And yet when you're in that time of change, it certainly just feels right now like a bunch of labor pains. And I've learned in the past that labor pain is an energetic gift for the soul who is coming in, so they can anchor into this place where there's the appearance of time and space, right? In a man's body, in a body that can never give birth to a child. I'm really not actually equipped to speak about this, right? And certainly have not had the experience that many of you listening here, mothers, have, right? But it feels like the purity of that pain, or the purity of that pleasure, or the purity of that sensual embodied experience of our feelings is so necessary. And so we must be careful not to just numb out, right, with the alcohol or the drugs. I mean, you've seen, I'm sure, the numbers of the heroin epidemic in this time of lockdown is just increasing so rapidly. For example, alcohol sales, whatever, you know, Netflix, all the things. Like, how do we stay on course? And how part of that too, right? Because I would say we've got to stay on course while we also take a look around. So, right? And look into all of these different things, right? And consider them, and not get out of balance, but help them balance us. Many feathers for the arrow, right? So we can find the middle way. All right. Maurice was speaking earlier about planetary nodes, and I want to show you something very important about this particular eclipse. Now, the heliocentric nodes, and some of you will know what I'm talking about. I'm not going to get so deep into the astronomy here, but basically those are from the sun's point of view, where the orbital paths of other planets cross the Earth's path, the ecliptic. Those are the heliocentric, the sun-centered nodes. And Venuses live in the signs of Gemini and Sagittarius. There are also geocentric nodes, which are from where from Earth's point of view, we see planetary paths cross. And this is an amazing thing about this eclipse. Now, this was a Stellarium astronomy software image of this morning's eclipse from where I live in the Bay Area of California, where we could not see this eclipse, right? And, you know, a really good image there, when it's a lunar eclipse, when the moon is moving through the shadow of the Earth, anywhere on Earth where it is night, you can experience that eclipse, weather dependent, right? So it's one of my favorite things in our day and age of the internet and all of this, that we will get so many images from around the world of the same lunar eclipse, and we get to see the moon from different positions. And that just really feels like a wonderful global connection. That's not true for the solar eclipse. Now, we will get amazing images of the solar eclipse because it was only visible in its totality in very southern Chile in Argentina, where there is such amazing night skies. I wish I've seen them with my own eyes. I have not yet, but seen so many brilliant pictures of them, because there are some of the greatest astrophotographers who live down there, because it's like typically cloudless nights of just dark sky. So I'm sure we're going to see some of the most epic solar eclipse photos from today yet. Now, why can you only see a solar eclipse even when it's total from a certain place? I mean, here you can see the sun had risen when the eclipse was happening. And the reason is, I mean, just think about it this way. It's like you're at a movie theater. The screen is the Earth, okay? The projector is the sun. And then you've just got somebody just like puts their hand across the projector, like doesn't block the whole light, but just some little, you know, shadow puppet or something. Like that's the moon shadow. It only traces a small path on Earth. And I'll show you where that was today and show you how it links to another time. So we were staring just at the sun, right? Eyes closed, letting the sunlight and knowing the moon was there, like help create the images on our eyelids, and then turning our back to the sun and looking at our shadow and going to the middle of the Earth where we are all connected. That's something I'll be speaking much more about in the ceremonies to come next week. So let me show you something very beautiful and unique about this eclipse. There are a few things. So still, Aaron, let me dim the lights here a little bit. Check out Venus's orbital path, right? So that's shown now here in green. And notice that the eclipse aligned right at a place where the green, Venus's path, crosses the yellow, which is the ecliptic as it's seen from Earth. Okay, so this eclipse was on one of the nodes, the geocentric Earth points of view nodes of Venus. So may the goddess guide us, may love guide us, and may the love of wisdom, philosophy that is so connected to Sagittarius guide us, and allow Venus's current placement in the scales of balance, but in the tropical sign of Scorpio, help us know that we will find balance not by faking peace or avoiding the things that would feel like they're going to take us away from our equilibrium, but by diving deep into authenticity, into seeing the magic of power, the power of magic, you know, and facing that in us, and shifting, as I like to say, in a loving way, from serving the suppressed to control me to controlling the expressed to serve me. And I think Venus is guiding us there to tell us more about truth. Now, speaking of truth, there's a lot of nonsense about this cat Ophiuchus being a 13th astrology sign or zodiac sign. No. And I've dismantled that in other places. But Ophiuchus is an amazing being whose serpent rises up to the northern crown above the scales, right? So this is for me the Kundalini rising. And there's so much more to say, but notice where this eclipse aligned constellationally, okay? There's a very sacred place here where the tail of the scorpion and the arrow of the archer, and I use those names, not Scorpio and Sagittarius, because signs and constellations are very different things. But this eclipse aligned right here at the leg of Ophiuchus, and Ophiuchus stands on the galactic center. Okay, I can just kind of quickly show you where the radio telescoped measured galactic center is, and it projects to 27 degrees tropical Sagittarius in our current day and age. In the tropical zodiac, the eclipse was at 23 Sag, very close by, 4 degrees that way, and about 4 degrees this way is the galactic gate. And one of the things that, if you know my work, you'll hear me speak about often, which is the crossing place of the Milky Way, our galaxy, with the ecliptic, our solar system. So that is a powerful thing. So may Venus and may this great galactic neighborhood, I mean, no city, I mean, no world, right, of hundreds of billions of stars assist us here on Earth as in these labor pains. And let us not take the drugs that would push that pain away, but rather find the pleasure, because the pain will help us embrace the moment now, the only moment, so we can take full advantage of this opportunity for great change. What is the truth? What is your truth? Remember that. Don't let that be taken away from you. Use that as the seed of this great tree that is growing with many branches that will consider all of the air. It's all good air, right? Reach for every star. They're all beautiful stars. All right, so a little bit about why this says Solar Ceros Series 142 here. We're gonna go till 4, which gives me 23 minutes. So look, we might go a little late because we do want to address some questions too, but let me take you over here to a few slides around eclipse cycles, and I'll try to be quick. Why is 18 the card of the moon and 19 that of the sun in the major arcana of the tarot? I'm sure this is telling us some of the great mysteries of the nodal cycles. Now, the lunar nodes, as we said earlier, take 18.6 years to transit the zodiac. They do so retrograde, generally speaking. And it's actually 18.618, which brings in the golden number, and I digress. But it's often been said, okay, well, you're in these powerful gateways of a nodal return. Like Maurice found astrology in his first year. I found astrology in my second here, and I find these to be such powerful gateways of alignment to the soul path, the path to purpose, you know, like really why we came here to incarnate. And it's my great honor to often speak with seekers who sit at my table here on the internet these days, in these great sacred gateways of life during nodal returns, which happen every 18.6 years. But you'll notice that what I use for these windows have 18 on one side and 19 on the other, twice 18 being 36, twice 19 being 38, etc. And the reason is because of the many months. What is a month? Why do we have 12 signs? So first, I'll introduce you to, many of you, this will not be new, the idea of a sidereal month. Sidereal means of the stars. So this is seen as moon's consecutive alignments to a particular star, right? So let's say that the moon is with this galactic cross, which it was here on December 4th of 2014. It takes on average 27 1/3 days for the moon to get back to that degree of the zodiac, right? And it's not going to be like new moon to new moon. That's a different kind of month, right? Because of course, also in 27.3 days, the sun's moved by about that many degrees. But this is called the sidereal month. And we can see that in the chart just by moon's return from 127 1/3 day average period from 1 degree of the zodiac back to that degree, okay? So that's one way to think of a month. There's 13 1/3 of those in a year. And there's a reason why, you know, there's 27 nakshatras, and I'm gonna leave that behind for now for the sake of time. It's gonna take like a week of eclipse classes for me to transmit all these things that the sky's been teaching me over the last few years. The next month I'll talk about is the Cyanotic month, and we see the fire of the sun. Why? Because synod means meeting, right? And the synod of the moon and the sun are new moon, right? That's from Earth's point of view where moon meets the sun. Now, unless it's an eclipse and you happen to be on Earth where you can see it, a new moon is a no moon, as I was saying before, right? But we can calculate this mathematically, and it takes on average 29 1/2 days between new moon and new moon, or full moon or full moon. Now that it's the cyanotic cycle, I should say we should start with the meeting with the new moon, okay? 29.53059 days. We observe the cycle in the sky by watching moon wax and wane, right? The great month of phases. And in the chart by seeing moon's consecutive conjunctions with the sun, right? There are 12 1/3 about cyanotic months a year. Right? So 13 1/3 sidereal, 12 1/3 cyanotic. Now the metonic cycle is something important to consider when you're looking at solely lunar events, okay? Like an eclipse. Here's the math that shows it's only about 2 hours off and using their average periodicities. And this is an amazing synchronization of appalling rhythms of Earth and sun, the golden year, right? Earth about sun seasons. And the lunation, Earth, moon, sun, right? New moon to new moon, consecutive synods. Amazingly, these rhythms synchronize. I mean, you're taking literally the year 365.242199 days, a lunation, 29.53059 days, and finding a place where those strange rhythms synchronize. And they do. That's the most amazing thing. So this 19-year period, it is essential to solely lunar calendars like the Hebrew calendar, the Chinese calendar. And amazingly to me, because I'm just such a student of number magic, is that 19 of these years equal 235 lunations. And you probably know that this is part of the Fibonacci sequence, and that also the current tilt angle of the Earth is about 23.5 degrees. How did this happen? Okay, now importantly, I'm going to show you this. That 235 cyanotic months, okay, phases, equal about 254 sidereal months, right? So this is showing us that not only has the sun gotten around, I'm going to get back there, it's 19 times in this period, and that's 235 lunations. So the moon has gotten around 254 times in that period. And that means that every 19 years, there's going to be solely lunar events aligned basically to the same zodiacal degrees. And so in the case of a new moon, You can look 19 years before and 19 years after, and you will see a new moon at the same degree of the zodiac, right? It might be one day or after in the calendar that most of us use because the Gregorian leap year system is so funky. Might be slightly off of that exact degree of the zodiac, but it's going to be pretty dang close. So what's 2020 minus 19? 2001. What happened that year, right? That one's a pretty, if I say 2003, you're like, 2002, which is one we'll also talk about because of 18 years, but 2001, December, what was up with you, right? That was the event that changed the world and that we're still experiencing, I will argue. So for this period called the Saros cycle, which is 18.03 years, right? It's trippy. It's 18 years, 11 days, and 8 hours. And this is the period between consecutive eclipses of a Saros family or a Saros series, or some say Saros series, but I try to keep that word away from our eclipse study, okay? Because there's something to be excited about this. And I think we need to be careful of these old transmissions of we should just be sorry, or it's an image of sorrow. Now, I have had eclipse experiences and witnessed really profound eclipse experiences that would lean towards some of the old superstitious messages, if you will. I think we need to be careful with such powerful gateways and reverent and respectful. But I've also seen the most amazing breakthroughs. I mean, so much of my own career as an astrologer was really skyrocketed by that August solar eclipse in 2017, or maybe the lunar eclipse that had preceded the solar eclipse, because it was right at my midheaven. And Maurice asked me to compose my first professional astrological article for Organization for Professional Astrology, for whom he was president at the time. And another community astrology hub brought me on to speak. I was touring and speaking, and I don't know, it just kind of happened for me. And I saw that eclipse gateway because I was in service to it, right? Really supporting me. And I hope this will be the same for you as we choose to intentionally align to these powerful portals. 18 years, 11 days. Right now the sun moves about 11 degrees in 11 days, right? So unlike the Metonic cycle, 19 years exactly, this period of a Saros cycle is going to move the, as I like to say, like heartbeats of the dragon, like these consecutive eclipses of the same family. It's going to move about 11 degrees through the zodiac. And it's actually 18 years, 11 days, and 8 hours, a third of a day, a third of the Earth's spin. So these eclipse families, like for a South Node eclipse like the one that happened this morning, they start with a very partial solar eclipse at Earth's south pole. And then they very slowly snake their way up and around the globe, taking about 1,300 years before they finish at the Earth's north pole. And at that time, another South Node eclipse, or before that, or, you know, there's a time where there's two that are going on kind of in the same, it's like it's reincarnating even before it's transitioned, if you will. It's an amazing thing. North Node eclipses, by the way, start at Earth's North Pole and snake down and around. And actually at OPA, at Organization for Professional Astrology, OPA, O-P-A, astrology.org, you can go into the articles there. And one of the articles, I think that the first ones that you'll see is an eclipse article I wrote some years ago, where you get to tune into a lot of these different cycles and periodicities. It's really amazing, profound, deep study of these three parts of the philosophy of the sun, moon, earth system. So 18 years, 11 days, and 8 hours. And so we'll look at a couple of recent incarnations of this eclipse family. That periodicity, just so you know, like if I asked you astrologers, what's the smallest number that 2, 3, and 4 all divide equally into? And the answer is 12, right? With polarity, triplicity, quadruplicity. What if I asked you to synchronize 29.53059 days, which is cyanotic? Because of course, eclipses of the same family, if it's a solar eclipse family, it's got to be a new moon, right? So it's going to have to be some multiple of the lunation, new moon to new moon. It also has to synchronize with not with the sidereal, because it's not in the same degree of the zodiac, which is what sidereal is, right? but it does have to synchronize with the draconic month, which is moon either north node back to north node or moon south node back to south node. Okay, and that's a different period. And it also has to be a even multiple of animalistic months, and that is moon Lilith, so, or moon perigee, because the distance of the moon to the earth is going to also, remember, speak to what kind of eclipse it is, and it's going to contribute in a very significant way to the general shape of the eclipse curve. So it's these 3 months or 3 types of moons that must coincide. And we say, okay, 12 is the smallest number that 2, 3, 4 all divide into. Well, what about if you try to synchronize these strange rhythms, right? And the answer is 18.03 years, or 18 years, 11 days, and 8 hours. All right, so I'm going to show you a little bit of that happening in charts. So here we are this morning, right? First, let me go back 19 years ago in 2001. And we will find that at that time, there was an eclipse, right? Remember, within about 10 degrees of either node, either an annular or total eclipse. This one, by the way, was not total, it was annular. Too far from the earth for the moon to occult the entire solar disk. And I can see that because it's square true black moon Lilith. So if you're following, I did a decent job in a short amount of time presenting some of those astronomical dynamics in the first chair earlier of mine. Notice that it was also very near Mercury. There's many interesting things here to see, but this is not an eclipse of the same family, okay? Part of that you can see in the proximity to the node. Notice that this eclipse is 4 degrees before the node, okay? 19 years later, the new moon is in the same degree, but the nodes are in an 18.6 year pathway this way. So they've circled and gone a little bit further, right? 19 years being more than 18.6 years. And so what we see in today's eclipse, now shown on the outside with the 2001 eclipse in the middle, is that the new moon's in the same place, but the node is in an earlier degree of the zodiac, right? And so this one 4 degrees on the other side. And again, the animalistic period, the Lilith period, is different altogether. So this one is a super-ish moon, and so therefore a total solar eclipse, where this one was annular. Okay. And they're both amazing, right? And we're linked in to 2001. And we're also linked into 2002. So let me reverse this, and I will show you that 18 and years, 11 days, and 8 hours ago, here on December 3rd, 2002, this was the last time that this eclipse family that the astronomers call Solar Cero Series 142, some astrologers refer to it as 4 South, by the way. There's a different way to name these eclipses, and that's maybe a tale for another time. But notice that in 2002, we had another Sagittarius eclipse. Notice that it also was quincunx, true black moon Lilith, right? So that's the same animalistic arrangement, size and speed of the moon. And notice that just like this one today, we're looking at about 3 degrees from the node, right? Which just reminds me I did bad math before, right? Because today's eclipse, I said 4, but it's about 3 degrees away, right? That is going to change very slightly. So these things will eventually go away. I could go 18 years before this date and then find my way to, I think this is it. Interestingly to me, the first time that this particular eclipse family snaked its way into the sign of Sagittarius, because see, they're going to move 11 degrees each time, 18 years, 11 days, and 8 hours. The first time it came into the sign of Sagittarius was 1984. And of course, that interests me because of the whole George Orwell thing. Now, notice that that eclipse was relatively quincunx Lilith, about 3 degrees from the node, right? And there's a whole different story going on, including the fact that while that eclipse was in Sagittarius, like today's and the eclipse in 2001 were, now the node's in Scorpio, or then the node was in Scorpio. Okay, we could go on and on like this. I just want to show you quickly my favorite eclipse, not my email, not that. Geez, sorry, out of control. Jeez, really don't want to be showing people's names. My apologies to anyone soul song people whose names just showed up. I meant to open this page. Yikes. Boundaries. All right, sorry. This is moonblink.info/eclipse/search. And what I'm going to do is type in 2020 to 2020, and I see all the eclipses of this year. And because, you know, if you're doing Gregorian stuff, we have eclipses really early in the Gregorian year and really late in the Gregorian year. So there were a particularly high amount of eclipses in the Gregorian year of 2020. Well, add that to this mix of all these things that we've been tracking, right? These powerful heavenly events. So you can see the eclipse here. So I can click on December 14th, 2020. It will show me not only that it was a total solar eclipse and 2 minutes and 10 seconds of totality, but it shows me exactly where you had to be on Earth to see the eclipse in its totality. And then I also see this image from NASA where we can find other places where the eclipse was seen. And a lot of South America witnessed this eclipse. Here in Peru, only about 20% of the sun was seen to be occulted by the moon, right? I'd love to show more about that on an astro map, but now's not the time considering time. All right, just because you don't see it doesn't mean you don't be it. That is for sure. This is a powerful experience for us all. In Bill Meridian's wonderful book, The Predictive Power of Eclipse Paths, he looks also to longitudinal lines and latitudinal lines. So anywhere where this eclipse at its maximum latitude and longitude, you can draw vertical and horizontal lines from there. That one you'll see will get pretty close to the eastern seaboard in DC. Much more about that another time if you would like. But for now, I just want to bring us into our hearts. I'll slow my speedy share down and ask you to consider what was alive for you in 2001 and what was alive for you in 2002. I want to show one more chart, however, because I think looking at those eclipses will help you know more about today's portal, feeling those times in your own life. I do want to say that when you see an eclipse alignment like today's, and if it has a strong alignment like it did for me and for Maurice opposite our moons, also consider, do you have planets that are 11 degrees on either side? Because again, the Saros moves 11 degrees between its repetitions. So this last one was at 12 Sag, and before that, the first degree of Sag. And this I call shadow pulsing. So just introduce that to you. Another thing we can do is to look at the eclipse series here on Moonblink. It's wonderful. So you can click there for the eclipse. You can click here for the Saros series. We can see when it last came around. And those years were 2002, 1984, 66. Some serious, Vietnam things were happening then. I'll just note 48, 30, 1912. And we go back, and we can go all the way back. This eclipse started in 1624 on April 17th. And as I said before, South Node eclipses start at Earth's South Pole, very partial eclipse, who's there to see it anyway. And then they slowly snake their way up and around the globe, becoming total when they reach typically temperate climates. So here's the first total eclipse of this series. I think that's a fascinating chart to cast. But many will say that the first eclipse of the series, in a way, will indicate, just as your birth chart indicates much of your life's experience, that the first eclipse of a series will indicate some story that all of the eclipses of the cycle will follow. So this is that eclipse. And I mean, I think it's amazing to see this yod, or this so-called finger of God, between Jupiter, Neptune, Venus in Chiron. Now, of course, Neptune and Chiron had not yet been discovered at that point, but that doesn't mean they weren't there. The eclipse itself in late degrees of Aries, the nodes in Libra, Aries. And so maybe something about that nodal path will speak to this eclipse in general. I'm feeling some of that, but again, this eclipse is in my 7th house. You can see the wedge with Saturn. I'll just let you sit with this chart, and maybe we'll go a little longer and we can speak about some of the things we see. But I do, some will call this like a Venus Neptune mutual reception. Traditional astrology would associate Jupiter, of course, with Venus. And either way, we see no reception according to the tradition in the quincunx. And there's something very mysterious here of Neptune, very close to the node, of Venus in Pisces, and Jupiter. And there's so much energy here with Saturn, Uranus, right? We know we're coming into a Saturn Uranus square, right? We're coming into a Jupiter Saturn conjunction. So notice some of the similarities all the way back then in 1624 and now. And I wish we had hours to speak about that another time, okay? I do just want to show one more image from moonblink.info, and I encourage you to go play here and to type in the year of your birth at moonblink.info/eclipse/search. You can follow your Sero series for your prenatal eclipse and postnatal eclipse. Is a profound thing to do. One of my favorite things to do is to give eclipse and eclipse cycle readings. But I want to show you that this eclipse, according to the current thought, this family is going to last all the way to 2904. So the way that we bring our energy to it now will, of course, influence all moments after now and maybe before. Yes, I'm that weird. But these are particular periods in earthly events. Like we can look forward to 18 years, 11 days, and 8 hours from now, right? We are influencing that. We're influencing every moment. Okay, so I think I should stop and ask Maurice to come on here. And it's 4:01, so we've kind of reached the end of the time, but we'll go a little bonus if that's okay with you, because I would love to address these questions. Maurice, it looks like maybe you were typing answers because I see a lot of them have gone away.
You there? Because you're breaking up.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that.
Just now. So
Okay.
The whole thing was fine, but just to the last minute.
Well, now it's supposed to get eclipsed, right? So. Yeah, before we look at any questions, let's just say one more time, right? We're really happy that you are here with us. I think maybe before we go into questions, we should just kind of drop into prayer.
Just one last thing. I want to just share something that happened as we were speaking.
Great.
Which is very graphic about eclipses. And I think, it's nice to see things in action. Look at this image. So this is what happens during eclipses. The tables turn very quickly. Changes occur, not just on a political level, but on a personal level. Now, some of you may not feel it, it's just a more intense time maybe, but there's no significant change. But that's what I mean by when it is activating something, it's immediate, it's quick, and it's accelerated. Now, Bar happens to be a Gemini, and his Mars happens to be a 24 Virgo. So the eclipse was squaring his Mars, and there he's eclipsed. Like, look at the symbolism. He's eclipsed. And it can be that portal where things are removed from your life. It's like they're sucked into some kind of black hole, and then new things come in. Even you will see, and this is, not an easy thing to think about, but it does happen that many souls choose to depart on eclipses. My father died on an exact solar eclipse on his natal node. So he had a no return eclipse, and out of I won't say out of the blue because he wasn't completely well, but he was not on the deathbed. He decided to leave. And when there is such a change in your life, some kind of rotation, some kind of tables turning, also think about it as far as our ceremonial journey. What is it that needs to be relinquished? What needs to be eclipsed? As you know, this is the eclipse time, and we are next moving into the Aquarian activation of Jupiter, the ruler of the eclipse, moving to a new sign. So let's drop down now.
Well, let's share a couple more as long as we've opened that gateway. First of all, some people asked where you can find this recording. People are, in other time zones and it's time for bed or whatever. It will be on this Facebook group that we actually created for a retreat some time ago and are doing the 3 R's and repurposing for this happening. So you can find at facebook.com/Spirit Chew without an L retreat. And we have a link on our own pages. This page where actually it's happening live right now, maybe a little bit beyond time. So you can go in there and join our group. We'll also be posting the ceremonial happenings there. If you're on the Zoom right now, that means you signed up. And so we will be sending out messages to you with a link to watch it again. Now, a very important thing, of course, happened today, and also while this was happening, looks like the Electoral College confirmed that Biden is now the United States president-elect. And so let's look at Trump, right? Where today's eclipse, let me turn these around, was very close to Trump's own. He was born during a lunar eclipse. He's in a nodal return. He's in this gateway. And in this gateway, I'll say the eclipses are actually more powerful than these nodal gateways. That for me, it's 72 years to 76 years old, that particular one. But I mean, the alignments are profound here, right? And Trump was just eclipsed as the president, right? And let's look at President-elect Joe Biden here. And while we don't see necessarily very strong alignments. I mean, it's a Venus return.
I mean,
so Maurice, point those out in just a second, because there are a lot of very strong alignments, right? But with this eclipse particularly, one thing I want to point out, because we were just looking at cycles, right? Where was the last eclipse of the series? 12 Sag, opposites Biden's Saturn. Where was the one before that in 1984? The first degree of Sag, opposite Biden's Uranus, in very close to his ascendant, and squaring his node. So what I would say is something started then that's been building for these 36 years. And that's why I encourage you to look at 11 degrees and before and after, not just conjunctions, but opposition, squares, and other aspects. So sorry, Maurice, to cut you off. Would you say?
Well, just a quick look at this. Definitely remember the degree of the eclipse staying potent beyond the time. But in this case, you see how the nodes are important as well, not just the degree of the eclipse, or the degree of the node, which is 19, and happens to square his angles, 19 MCIC. So that gives another push to it.
100%, and maybe even more so if there is a planet squaring the nodes, because it'll be transiting, in this case, the meridian at the IC. But yeah, absolutely. So when you're looking at eclipses, and again, that's like, a series of classes to really try to unpack that amazing dragon. But look at alignments to all planets, but especially moon and node and sun, and look at, as Maurice says, not just where the eclipse is, but where the nodes are, because the nodes are, in a sense, these traveling syzygies, right? They are that Apollo's arrow. They are the moon, sun, and earth as one. They're the potential, the entire wave cycle for these three parts. Okay, so I wanted to say also, because I didn't really say this, I mean, if you look at 2001, and of course 9/11, and then 2002, where, if you remember, speaking about strange news, like the whole weapons of mass destruction thing that led the United States into Iraq, there was also the Patriot Act during this time, which gave the power to the president to go to war without congressional approval for the first time. And now, as Trump is saying, and I'm not saying the guy's like should win the peace prize because he's been bombing Yemen even more than Obama did, which should be a world record, and it is. But he has been saying that he wants to bring soldiers home from Iraq, from Syria, from other places. And now it looks like a law is going to be passed by Congress that actually allows the president to go to war without congressional approval, but prevents the president from ending wars without congressional approval. And I find that frankly fucking terrifying, right? It's like literally the opposite of what the two things should be. Like anybody, in my opinion, should be able to end a war. You know what I mean? And I understand that that's how things isn't how things work, and that I shouldn't be so naive and all of this, you know. But it's a pretty terrifying thing I'm seeing in that right now. And I mean, like I just can't say enough that one of the great truths that we should deepen into, right, is that, you know, what is the purpose of war on a spiritual level? And that's something I've been sitting with. I don't want to say too much more than that, not only for the sake of time, but whatever is alive in your own life right now, wherever the struggle is, wherever the confusion is, may it be met with excitement. May it be met with opportunity. May it be met with surrender to the mystery. May it be met with the power of your imagination. And let us empower our hearts with optimism. We've been calling for a time of change. This is a time where the light divine in each of us has an opportunity to really shine more than ever. So I ask you, please, to create artistically, lovingly at this time, to imagine and invoke and manifest a world that you want to live in, starting with you. And I hope that you'll join us for our journey next week. Again, you can go to Maurice's website, mauricefernandez.com, and you'll find a link to our ceremonial journey. We will be emailing folks here on Zoom a video link along with an invitation to join the ceremonial transmissions on Zoom. Please join us at that Facebook group. It's another place. You can find it on our pages and the social media spots. And please, you know, do your ceremony and call your crew in and call your family together. And some of them won't be ready for words like ceremony or eclipse or conjunction, but just love them, right? And bring more love. So I'm very glad again, Maurice, that that you gave me a call, that you brought us together to do this. I'm very grateful for all of you that joined us here online, live, online, wherever you are, and in the future too. I want to share again the link.
You have
for
beautiful markings on your face with the sun.
It's the only sun eclipsed by the blinds. Yeah, so I'm going to share one more time a link for a donate button. We had to spend a good amount of money to be able to go live for this many people at the same time as it is. So any little thing you could give back, I'd really appreciate it. And there's a specific link where you can do that if you're in the right space and to do that. I know it's a typical time, especially to commit money anywhere, but like literally $1 from each of you would cover our costs for this thing. That would be really, really helpful. So appreciation in advance for anybody who chooses to go there. All right, time for me to shut my mouth.
Thank you so much. And everybody, if you are available in person or after the fact, join us for this adventure, for this journey in spirit and knowledge. The stronger we are together, the stronger the ripple effect. And as we've mentioned, there's a great deal of healing that is needed. So, happy Hanukkah for those celebrating. It's a celebration of light. And we will be in touch very soon. Gemini is flying to Sedona in a couple of days. And the altar here is empty, is waiting to be filled with this new energy that we are seeding for the new times.
Maurice, for those who will join us for the elemental ceremonies, do you have, I mean, I know like a bowl for water, maybe a candle for the fire. Are there other things that you want to share with people to kind of invite them to gather together before we start our days of ceremony next week?
Yeah, I mean, I think it would be good to post it so it's not rushed. But generally speaking, be in that mindset to begin with. And I sent you some directions about just clearing, with some salt and water first and then smudging. And then bring, the focus is going to be, elevating everything through the element of air. So think about anything in your life that symbolizes the element, whether it's, we start with water, then fire, then earth, and then air. So if you can find objects that symbolize that transition, something for water, something for each one of them, and then air, also invoke the animals, the birds, the feathers, the smoke. We'll contemplate and discuss that through the Facebook group as well.
Yeah, Maurice, I'm very happy to see also that you were able to type answers for most of the questions and answers that came in, and also seeing a lot of gratitude and love from people. And thank you so much. Seeing somebody just write that you are in Sedona, I'm sorry to say I won't have time to do like personal sessions there, but if you want to reach out to do an eclipse reading, as I'm reading you wrote about, contact me at geminibrett.com, or oh my gosh, I'm having my website's getting eclipsed right now. So send me an email at morethan.astrology@gmail.com, or you can just book a session at the site. It is one of my favorite things to do. These eclipses are so magical. And you all are, and Maurice, as are you. I'm very excited to spend some time dropping into ceremony and to teach classes with you again. So finally, donate if you'd like. I will, when we send out the recording, I'll send that link too. Please, no pressure there. But also, we invite you to join us in this series of classes, 4 more classes like this, and a variety of subjects, which are 3 very much invited by the relevance of the heavenly happenings in this astronomical moment, and a couple, and actually all of them, really kind of lifelong explorations. The elements and endless contemplation. How do we approach spirituality and astrology? How do we hold these things, which, I think at the beginning, it just feels like they're the same. And then you start seeing some challenges there. So I'm really looking forward to that conversation. And in those classes, we'll have each of us kind of presenting individually, and then we will definitely have time for question and answers where we get to speak with one another, which I wish there was all the time and every day, so we could do more of that, Maurice. But I'm really looking forward to spending some time with you. And everyone, again, thanks for being here. Big love to you. Thank you so much for changing the world. We'll see you in space.
Thank you.